Tonight, go outside. Look up. If you're lucky enough to live somewhere without too much light pollution, you'll see a few hundred stars, maybe a couple thousand. You'll probably think they're beautiful. Maybe you'll try to find a constellation. Then you'll go back inside and forget about them. But for most of human history, the night sky didn't look like that. It looked like the sky was on fire. Without artificial light, the average human could see roughly 4,500 stars with the naked eye. The Milky Way wasn't a faint smudge you needed a national park to find. It was a blazing river of light that stretched from one horizon to the other, every single night. And our ancestors didn't just see it, they stared at it for hours, for thousands of generations. They watched it more carefully than you've ever watched anything in your life. And they had one question that wouldn't leave them alone. What are those lights? The answers they came up with didn't just shape mythology. They shaped religion, navigation, agriculture, architecture, and the entire trajectory of civilization. The stars made us who we are, and almost nobody talks about how. Let's start with the oldest interpretation we know of. In the Lascaux caves of southern France, painted roughly 17,000 years ago, there's a famous scene. A bull, birds, a mysterious pattern of dots above the bull's shoulder. For decades, archaeologists assumed the dots were decorative, random. Then in 2018, researchers from the University of Edinburgh published a study in the Athens Journal of History. They argued that the dot patterns in Lascaux and other Paleolithic caves across Europe weren't random at all. They were star maps. The cluster above the bull's shoulder matches the Pleiades. Other formations correspond to recognizable constellations. These cave painters weren't just drawing animals. They were recording the sky 17,000 years ago, maybe longer. That means humans have been tracking the stars for at least as long as they've been making art. The two impulses might be inseparable. But tracking the stars and understanding them are different things. And for most of human history, the explanations were not scientific. They were personal. The stars were alive. In ancient Egypt, the sky was the body of the goddess Nut. She arched over the earth, her skin covered in stars. Every night, she swallowed the sun. Every morning, she gave birth to it again. The stars weren't distant objects. They were part of a living body stretched above you. The Egyptians tracked one star more obsessively than any other, Sirius. They called it Sopdet. Its appearance just before dawn in mid-July, an event called the Heliacal Rising, signaled the annual flooding of the Nile. That flood was their entire agricultural system, their food supply, their economy, their survival. One star told them when to plant. One star kept them alive. So when they looked at Sirius, they didn't see a ball of burning gas 8.6 light years away. They saw a god deciding whether they would eat that year. The Greeks took a different approach. They saw the stars and asked a question nobody had really formalized before. What are they made of? In the 5th century BC, the philosopher Anaxagoras proposed that the stars were not gods, not spirits, not jewels embedded in a cosmic dome. He said they were massive stones, set on fire by the rotation of the sky. The sun, he claimed, was a burning rock larger than the entire Peloponnese Peninsula. This was revolutionary. It was also heretical. The Athenians charged Anaxagoras with impiety. He was put on trial for saying the sun was not a god. He barely escaped with his life. That's how dangerous it was to suggest the stars were physical objects. Not because the idea was stupid, because it stripped the sky of meaning. If the stars are just rocks, then nobody is watching over you. Nobody placed them there for a reason. The universe doesn't care about your harvest, your prayers, or your fate. That terrified people. So the idea didn't stick. Not for a long time. Instead, the model that dominated Western thought for over 1,000 years came from Aristotle. He argued that the Earth sat at the center of the universe, surrounded by a series of nested crystalline spheres. Stars were embedded in the outermost sphere, perfect and unchanging, made of a fifth element called ether that didn't exist on Earth. The stars weren't fire. They weren't gods. They were something fundamentally different from everything in your daily life. They were eternal. This model wasn't just philosophy. It became the operating system of medieval Europe. The Catholic Church adopted it. Ptolemy refined it. For over 400 years, this was reality. The stars were fixed. The Earth was the center, and everything had its place. Questioning it wasn't just wrong, it was sin. But on the other side of the world, other civilizations were building entirely different relationships with the same sky. Aboriginal Australians have the oldest continuous astronomical traditions on Earth, stretching back at least 65,000 years. And their reading of the stars is unlike anything in Western history. They didn't just see the bright stars, they saw the dark spaces between them. The dark patches in the Milky Way formed shapes: an emu, a serpent, a canoe. In Western astronomy, constellations are made of stars. In Aboriginal astronomy, the most important constellations are made of darkness. And these weren't just stories. The position of the dark emu constellation in the sky told people when emu eggs were ready to harvest. The stars and the spaces between the stars were a calendar, a food map, a survival guide passed down for tens of thousands of years, without writing, without telescopes, without anything except human eyes and human memory. The Polynesians did something equally extraordinary. They navigated the entire Pacific Ocean using the stars. No compass, no charts, no instruments. Polynesian navigators memorized the rising and setting positions of over 200 stars. They could determine latitude by measuring the height of specific stars above the horizon using only their outstretched hand. They crossed thousands of miles of open ocean and found tiny islands invisible from more than a few miles away. The stars weren't myths to them, they were roads. Now here's where it all converges. Every one of these civilizations, the cave painters, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Aboriginal Australians, the Polynesians, they all did the same thing. They looked up, they saw patterns, and they made those patterns mean something. They attached survival, identity, gods, philosophy, and direction to points of light they couldn't touch, couldn't reach, and couldn't explain. And they were all wrong about what the stars actually are. Every single one of them, including Anaxagoras, who came the closest. The stars are not gods. They're not stones on fire. They're not embedded in crystal spheres. They're not ancestral spirits. They're thermonuclear explosions, millions of times larger than Earth, burning millions of degrees at their core, scattered across distances so vast that the light you see tonight left some of those stars before human civilization even existed. Some of the stars you're looking at right now are already dead. Their light is still traveling. You're seeing ghosts. We figured that out roughly 150 years ago. That's it. 150 years out of 300,000. For 99.95% of human history, nobody on Earth knew what a star was, but they built civilizations around them anyway. They planted crops by them, they sailed oceans by them, they built pyramids aligned to them, they waged wars over what they meant, they fell in love under them and buried their dead facing them. The stars didn't change. We did. We went from seeing gods to seeing gas, from seeing fate to seeing physics, from seeing meaning to seeing mechanics, and we gained something extraordinary in the process. We gained the truth. But sometimes, when you're standing outside at night, in a rare place dark enough to actually see the sky the way your ancestors saw it, you get this feeling. A smallness, a silence, a pull towards something you can't name. That's 300,000 years of your ancestors talking. They're reminding you that long before we understood the stars understood us. They told us when to eat, where to sail, and who we were. And we looked up every single night, not because we had the answers, but because we couldn't stop asking the question. We still can't.